king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 255. It is easy to get troops, but difficult to find generals. The mercenaries that Saul recruited in Württemberg arrived in Auric one after another. These soldiers were selected according to Marin's requirements. They were all simple mountain people, not city thugs. The key was that they were in good health and very obedient. In addition, Schwartz also sent people to the Alsace region to recruit a group of rural youths. Although Alsace is not as mountainous as Württemberg, the folk customs here are simple and obedient. In Marin's opinion, it was relatively easy to recruit 5,000 mercenaries. Because, in this era, the German population grew rapidly, and many manors had surplus populations. Being a soldier and eating food was not necessarily a way out for poor German youths. All in all, the recruitment of mercenaries was generally smooth. On the contrary, the recruitment of mercenary officers was not smooth. Marin stipulated that squad leaders could be selected from the army. For example, the squad leader of 5,000 new soldiers could be selected from among the veterans. However, starting from the company captain, Marin required that he must be educated and able to read, and preferably a wandering knight who had just left home. Because Marin's company has as many as 250 people. With so many soldiers under his control, he can actually perform some tasks independently. However, when assigning tasks, if the company commander is illiterate, it will become a joke. Although the messenger can also give the order orally, it is easy to cause errors when passing it by word of mouth. Once the wrong order is conveyed, it may affect the battle situation. Therefore, Marin insisted that officers at the level of company commander must be literate. Even though Steindorf, the commander of the Black Knights, was born a civilian, his ancestors were also rich, so he can still recognize words, although not many, but he can barely understand military orders. Moreover, at Marin's request, Steindorf is now cramming cultural knowledge at night. Originally, after Marin became the new Earl of East Frisia, many young wandering knights did intend to join Marin. However, the Duke of Saxony soon announced that he would not recognize Marin's status and might even send troops to seek justice for the dead Sexner family. Now, those young wandering knights who had originally planned to join Marin suddenly became hesitant. In the end, everyone chose to wait and see. If Marin can survive, naturally someone will join him. If he can't survive, then there's nothing to talk about. Although these young people from the Knight family were immature, none of them were fools. They wanted to establish their careers, but the premise was that the person they wanted to join could hold on. Therefore, with Marin's future uncertain, the young people chose to wait and see. After all, the Duke of Saxony was famous, and the Saxon family was even more famous in Germany. Marin was just a young man who had just emerged. When the two sides started fighting, most people would definitely stand on the side of the Duke of Saxony. At this time, if someone dared to open the market, everyone would definitely bet on the Duke of Saxony to win. Unfortunately, in everyone's opinion, no fool would open such a plate. Because, this is a very simple fact. Only Marin himself and his subordinates were amazed at the miracles created by Marin. They even thought that the combat effectiveness of the East Frisian army was much better than other armies of this era. Therefore, Marin's generals were very confident. In particular, Marin told them that the army would be expanded by 5,000. At the same time, the emperor was quite. The confidence came from Marin's cunning mind. This time, Marin gave the emperor advice, which allowed the emperor to control the vast Graubünden region without any effort before the Swiss reacted. The emperor was very happy. If it was a direct battle, the emperor would not have the confidence to occupy Graubünden with the intervention of the Swiss. Of course, both the emperor and the knights under Marin were relatively conservative. They all believed that it would be no problem for Marin to defend East Frisia, but it was unlikely that he could defeat the Saxon army head-on. It is no wonder that after Marin's Spanish phalanx was trained, it had not yet fully exerted its power. In the only battle against the Frisian army, the rain extinguished the fuse, making the phalanx's volley guns lose their power. Therefore, even the most optimistic East Frisian general did not think that the Spanish phalanx could defeat the Saxon army head-on, and still won with a smaller force. Only Marin, who clearly understood the direction of history, knew how amazing the defensive power of the Spanish phalanx was. Unlike the later film, The Legend of the Mercenaries, that depicted the Spanish phalanx, the real Spanish phalanx must have dug trenches in front of it. Marin made great progress on this basis, strengthening the trench from 1 to 2, and also used the inclined wooden spikes that the English army used to deal with the French knights. With these three safeguards, it would be a miracle if the cavalry could break through the Spanish phalanx. 2 trenches and a row of inclined wooden spikes would definitely make the cavalry rushing over, and the people and horses would fall off. The most powerful thing about the Saxon army is that it is financially strong and equipped with thousands of plate-armored knights. When thousands of plate-armored knights charge forward, it is absolutely like a torrent of steel. However, war horses are animals, not cold steel machines like tanks. If a war horse falls into a pit, it will fall over, and it will also be injured if it hits a slanted wooden stake. Therefore, no matter how many war horses there are, they are powerless in front of 2 trenches and a row of slanted wooden stakes. What's more, Marin also has muskets lined up to shoot and kill, specializing in attacking knights wearing plate armor. Even if the opponent's plate armor knight chooses to dismount and fight on foot, and wants to climb the pit to cross the defense line, he still has to ask the musketeers for permission. However, for various reasons, no one had ever seen the Spanish phalanx brutally beating the knights. Therefore, except for Marin, no one was optimistic about the Spanish phalanx confronting thousands of cavalry head-on. Even insiders think so, let alone those wandering knights who have not yet come to join them. Therefore, Marin sent people to various places to recruit wandering knights, but they were all rejected. Although everyone was not optimistic about Marin, no one knew whether Marin would make a comeback after this failure. Therefore, although the wandering knights all rejected Marin's recruitment, they did not say anything final. Only a small number of people thought that Marin would definitely fail, and they were very rude when they refused. This made Marin very distressed. There were 5,000 new recruits. He couldn't not assign literate officers to them, right? It was not very reliable to temporarily promote his subordinates to be company captains. Finally, Marin thought for a long time and decided to let each of the existing officers take on more responsibilities. Specifically, each officer was asked to double the number of troops under his command. For example, Schwartz originally commanded a square, but Marin asked him to command 2 squares at once. When fighting, veterans were placed in the front to fight, while new recruits were placed in the back as a reserve. At the same time, new recruits were mostly responsible for digging trenches. To this end, Marin ordered the blacksmiths under his command to forge a lot of engineer shovels. Similarly, Frundsberg and his men also commanded 2 square formations. Moreover, the company commanders also commanded 2 companies of men. Although commanding twice as many people is a test for them, these young people actually have a heart to strive for progress. On the battlefield, being able to command more people is definitely a great affirmation of their personal ability. So, even though it will be very tiring in the future, these young people are very excited and don't care even if they have to work harder. Moreover, Marin also said that if the Saxons can be defeated successfully this time, there will be great rewards. There will be a promotion in title and an increase in fiefdom. In order to motivate his men, Marin promised to give out 10,000 ugrams of land to reward all officers and soldiers who performed well. Moreover, these lands were considered fiefs and would not be taxed in the future. Therefore, although the soldiers under Marin were short of manpower, their morale was still quite high. Chapter 256 Importing British coal. Thanks to the efforts of the old cannon casting craftsman Old John and his assistants, the iron mold casting cannon finally made significant progress. Marin told Old John about Gong Zhenlin's iron mold casting cannon method in his memory, and Old John led people to start trying. In fact, the specific method is simple to say, but some details still need to be paid attention to. For example, in the original iron mold casting method, the first layer of paint on the inner wall of the mold is a mixture of fine rice husk ash and fine sand with water, and after painting, it must be dried. Except for southern Europe, the northern half of Europe only has wheat, not rice. So Old John had to use wheat husk ash as a substitute. Moreover, the specific ratio, how to make it most convenient to peel off the barrel, also requires experimentation. As for the second layer of coal ash, it is easy to find, just go to Texel Island to get some. Marin emphasized that after the 2 layers of paint are applied, they must be dried to ensure that there is no moisture. Otherwise, when pouring molten iron or copper, water vapor will easily evaporate and form a honeycomb inside the gun body. Old John led his men to try many times and finally mastered the method of casting cannons with iron molds. Of course, when he mastered the method of casting cannons with iron molds, he was free. From then on, it was basically impossible for him to return to Britain. However, his treatment was improved a lot, which was regarded as compensation for going free. Old John had always used pig iron in his experiments. Seeing how quickly pig iron could be turned into a cannon, Old John also proposed using iron to cast a 3-pound cannon. However, Marin asked him to load a lot of gunpowder into the barrel. After the test explosion, he found that the gunpowder used at the critical point of the original clay mold cannon easily blew up the barrel. In other words, the iron cannon cast by the iron mold casting is relatively brittle. However, there is no problem in casting bronze cannons using the iron mold casting method. The detection results of bronze cannons cast by the iron mold casting method are similar to those of bronze cannons cast by the mud mold casting method. However, the mud mold casting method requires at least a month for the mud mold to dry. In rainy weather, the drying time may exceed 3 months. Therefore, the efficiency of mud mold casting is very low. However, a group of craftsmen can cast several iron mold castings in one day, which is very fast. Once the cannon casting method was determined, Old John and his apprentices began to explode, quickly producing 3-pound bronze cannons. Moreover, under the guidance of Marin, these new rear-loading 3-pound bronze cannons not only added the same gun ears as the French, but also left a place at the back to install the recommended sight, the sight. The so-called sight is a very simple thing for the knight. It is a copper ruler perpendicular to the barrel. However, there is a round hole in the middle of the copper ruler, allowing the gunner's eyes to aim at the target through the round hole. The round hole and the direction of the barrel are parallel. Seeing the target from the round hole is equivalent to the barrel facing the target. In addition, Marin also instructed the blacksmiths to build enough caster-wheeled gun carriages that were popular in later generations. This type of gun carriage has a simple structure, lightweight, easy transportation, and is also easy to use. When in use, the 2 metal hind feet are placed on the ground. Generally speaking, if no changes are made, the muzzle is facing forward. If you want to pursue a shooting angle, you can raise the wheels a bit so that the hind feet can be lowered to facilitate the lifting of the muzzle. Moreover, there are foot spikes under the soles of the 2 metal hind feet. In this way, when firing, although the gun carriage retreats due to the recoil, the shoe spikes under the hind feet rub against the ground, which can prevent the gun carriage from retreating too much, so as to facilitate resetting. Seeing that the manufacturing of the 3-pound gun was on track, Marin was naturally happy. But before he could be happy for long, someone came to destroy the atmosphere. My lord, the island of Texel has reported that a ship of coal briquettes has been seized by the Principality of Guedes. What? Why? Marin was a little confused. Didn't Charles II form an alliance with him? Why did he seize his coal ship? It's because the tax officer of Guedes thinks that we have too many coal ships passing through the Rhine River, but we have never paid transit tax to the Principality of Guedes. Didn't you pay taxes before? Why are you talking about this now? In the past, Marin's coal ships sailed directly in the middle of the Rhine River, never docked, never paid taxes to anyone, and no one intercepted the coal ships. The coal ships mainly passed through the states of Mark, Bishopric of Munster, Duchy of Berg, Duchy of Cleve, Duchy of Guedes and the state of Zeeland at the mouth of the Rhine. The section through Duchy of Berg was relatively short, and the section through Bishopric of Munster was not very long either. Moreover, these 2 states were relatively mild and had never set up checkpoints on the river. The county of Zeeland is actually a region controlled by the Habsburg family. Marin once sent someone to greet them, so they naturally would not make things difficult. Only the Duchy of Guedes, Charles II, because of his ambition, needed a lot of taxes. Therefore, Duke Charles II of Guedes tried every means to impose taxes on ships passing through the river in his territory. Unfortunately, the Duchy of Guedes was located at the most important section of the Rhine estuary. Therefore, if you want to use the Rhine to transport to the sea, the Duchy of Guedes cannot be bypassed. Although Marin formed an alliance with Charles II, he did not tell Charles II that he had made a fortune by boiling salt with coal. Moreover, he could not tell anyone about this, because if he did, others would imitate him. In the past, although the scale of salt boiling on Texel existed, it was not very eye-catching. But since Marin opened up the salt trade route of the Teutonic Knights, the salt production on Texel began to double. If the salt production doubled, the amount of coal needed would also double. Therefore, Marin increased the coal transportation. In this way, many coal ships belonging to Marin appeared on the Rhine. After all, for inland river transportation, ships cannot be too big. If you want to transport so much coal, you can only increase the number of coal ships. Generally speaking, an inland river ship can only carry 100 to 200 tons of coal at most, and more often, it is a small boat carrying more than 10 tons or dozens of tons of coal. But the number of ships suddenly increased, and the forms were similar, which attracted the attention of the Principality of Guedes. Before, the Principality of Guedes only levied taxes on ships that docked. But Marin's ships were in the middle of the river, so they were generally not taxed. But this time, the tax officer of the Principality of Guedes who patrolled the river specially organized several ships full of soldiers, intercepted one of the small boats loaded with dozens of tons of coal, and demanded the payment of back taxes. In fact, the tax officer in charge of patrolling the river and collecting taxes in the Principality of Guedes did not know how much tax the coal ship owed. In fact, he did not care about the specific amount, he was just blackmailing. In fact, the tax officer just wanted to keep the money for himself. After learning about the situation, Marin frowned. Before, he let the coal ship go in the middle of the river not just to evade taxes. There was a bigger reason, which was to avoid attracting attention. Because once you pay taxes normally, although it doesn't cost much, your business secrets will be revealed through taxes. For example, if all coal ships passing through the Principality of Guedes paid taxes, it would inevitably expose the amount of coal that Marin transported to Texel Island. This amount was very large, and when others learned about this transportation volume, they would have questions: why did Texel Island need so much coal? Then, those who were interested would investigate. Once investigated, the fact that Marin made a fortune by boiling and selling salt would be exposed. Once this happens, it will be difficult for Marin to guarantee that other coastal countries will not imitate his handwriting. Apart from anything else, it is too easy for the Netherlands to imitate him. Maximilian I is also very interested in money. Moreover, knowing that he has become rich, several vassal states along the way will inevitably find ways to extort some tolls from him. Therefore, Marin was troubled by the current situation. Marin obviously didn't want his secret of making money to be exposed. Profits can only be maximized when enjoyed by one company alone. However, if you want to transport coal from the Ruhr area to Texel Island, there is only one route, the Rhine River. If you go by land, it's worse than by water. Not to mention how expensive it is to go by land, you have to pass through those tax checkpoints when you go by land, which is easier to be exposed than by water. Unless you don't import coal from the Ruhr area. Huh? Not importing coal from the Ruhr area? Marin's eyes suddenly lit up. There are two main coal-producing regions in Western Europe, the Ruhr area and the United Kingdom. There are also some coal mines in other regions, but none of them are large-scale. The best way to avoid importing coal from the Ruhr area is to import coal from the UK. Marin also inquired about the price of coal in the UK. In London, coal sold for about 6 shillings per charter long. But in the export port of Newcastle, it only sold for 4 shillings per charter long. This was because the prices in the UK were relatively high. In the Ruhr area, the market price of coal exporting areas was only 3 shillings per charter long. Marin only paid 2 shillings per charter long to buy coal from his own coal mine. However, even if he bought coal for salt boiling at 4 shillings per charter long, Marin still made a huge profit. After all, salt boiling was a huge profit, and Marin also used a powerful tool for salt boiling, such as a wood-saving stove. After much deliberation, Marin finally decided to reduce the amount of coal imported from his hometown to the previous level. This level is not too noticeable. In addition, Marin also decided to stop using small coal ships and use large coal ships. In this way, the number of coal shipments can be reduced and become less noticeable. Then, they sent people to Newcastle, the coal export port in the UK, to order a large amount of coal. Newcastle is just northwest of Texel Island, across the sea. Although the straight-line distance is definitely farther than Bochum, Newcastle is on the seashore and is a seaport. The coal-carrying ships leaving Newcastle must be seagoing ships. Seagoing ships have a large loading capacity and can carry a lot of coal at a time, which helps to reduce transportation costs. Moreover, sea transportation can also easily keep Marin's secret. Because once the ship leaves the harbor, God knows where it will go. Marin could have ordered a large amount of coal from Newcastle in the name of another country, and then shipped it to Texel Island to make salt. Even if the price of Newcastle coal was a little higher, it was nothing compared to the huge profits from making salt and the importance of keeping secrets. Thinking of this, Marin finally made up his mind. He found Kohler, send someone to bribe with money to redeem our coal ship. After listening to Marin's explanation, Kohler shook his head and said, "Young master, there's no need for me to take action for such a small matter, right? Indeed, it was just redeeming a person, and any subordinate could do it. Of course it's not that simple. You know, this is the first time our coal ship has been intercepted. And as far as I know, this is the personal behavior of the River Patrol tax officer. Others don't know about it at all." "What do you mean?" "Let the tax officer have an accident. Also, wait for a while after redeeming the person before taking action, so that people don't associate the two things together. In short, don't attract attention." Marin didn't want his secret of making a fortune by boiling salt to be exposed. If everyone knew that coal was used to boil salt, and everyone followed him, the price of salt would definitely plummet immediately, which would seriously damage Marin's interests. Therefore, Marin could only shut up the nosy River Patrol tax officer. "I understand. I'll arrange it right away." Kohler immediately left the palace and arranged for people to redeem the people and create an accident. Chapter 257 Columbus's arrangements. Thinking of coal transportation at sea, Marin suddenly remembered Columbus' fleet still tossing on the ocean. Calculating the time, Columbus' fleet should be in the coastal area of West Africa at this time. Historically, da Gama returned to Lisbon on September 9. Columbus did not waste time in Mombasa and Malindi, so Marin was sure that Columbus would be able to return to Europe in August. Columbus's return was definitely a great thing for Marin, because Columbus would return with a load of extremely expensive spices, which would have to be exchanged for money, and Marin would be very wealthy. At that time, he would have the money to start a plan to dig a large-scale canal in East Frisia and build a large number of Dutch windmills to drain the water from the swamps and transform them into fertile fields. There are too many swamps in the territory of East Frisia. If they can be converted into arable land, there will be more than 100,000 uglums of arable land, which is equivalent to nearly 1.5 million acres. However, digging ditches for drainage and building a large number of Dutch windmills required a huge initial investment. In this era, even a tycoon like the Duke of Saxony could hardly afford to transform thousands of square kilometers of swampland. It was not that the Duke of Saxony could not afford it, but that he had many other expenses and could not spend all the money on swamp transformation. After several years of development and management of the West Frisian Islands, Marin has deeply realized that the development of wasteland requires huge investment. For example, if Marin wants to develop 10 ugrams of land, 120 acres, first he needs people, at least a family of serfs. However, there are not many people in the West Frisian Islands, so he must go to the inland areas to recruit. However, Marin couldn't go to the inland area to recruit a serf, could he? He had to hire someone. If he hired someone, he had to pay him a day's salary, as well as travel expenses, meals, and accommodation expenses. Then, it costs a lot to bring a family of serfs to the islands. You have to pay for the journey after you recruit them, right? You also have to pay for their meals during the journey. Even if you feed them with low-quality black bread that is as hard as a brick, it costs 2 pfennigs a day for a family. In total, the total cost of recruiting a family of serfs, 5 people, to the West Frisian Islands was no less than 5 gold coins. If 10,000 people were recruited, the cost would be tens of thousands of gold coins. But this is just the beginning. After these serfs were recruited to the island, the first thing they did was not to farm, but to build houses for them so that they could be settled. In this era, the cost of building houses was also very high. Whether it was a wooden house or a stone house, the cost was very high. Fortunately, Marin knew how to build low-cost adobe houses, saving a lot of expenses. Otherwise, just the wood and stone materials for building houses for those immigrants would cost tens of thousands of gold coins. The cost of the house was not high. However, once the serfs were recruited, they had to work. And the newly arrived serfs had no food. Therefore, during the period from reclamation to autumn harvest, Marin had to pay for food to feed them. This would take more than half a year, and food was so expensive in Europe. Then, Marin had to equip these serfs with enough iron farm tools, he also had to buy livestock for them to use, he also had to provide seeds for spring plowing. All in all, the cost of immigration and land reclamation was very staggering. Therefore, although Marin made a lot of money from the Venetians and from selling salt, in the process of migrating more than 10,000 people to the Frisian Islands, most of the gold coins were consumed. Of course, these investments are worth it, and they will be fully recovered in a few years. However, in the early days, the investment was too large, and ordinary nobles could not afford it. Therefore, Marin was eagerly looking forward to the return of Columbus's fleet. However, while looking forward to Columbus's return, Marin did not lose his mind. Because he still had something very important to do. This matter is just passing the buck. Marin made the decision to send people to India for trade in a fit of rage, but later on, he felt that he was too hasty. Because the Portuguese have always regarded the route to India as their own forbidden fruit, and they would not allow others to interfere. If Marin was the king of Spain, he might be able to ignore the Portuguese. However, he was just a small baron at the beginning, and even now, he is just the monarch of a small state with more than 3,000 square kilometers of land and more than 80,000 people. Compared with Portugal, which has a population of more than 1 million and an area of nearly 100,000 square kilometers, Marin is still too weak. Although, in a direct confrontation on land, Marin is not afraid of a parallel import country like Portugal. But at sea, the powerful Portuguese fleet can teach Marin how to behave in a few minutes. After the return of da Gama's fleet, the Portuguese soon learned about the huge profits of the great navigation. Therefore, in order to have a monopoly, Marin was sure that if the Portuguese knew that he, Marin, also benefited from the great navigation, they would definitely be ruthless and send fleets to block the sea at all costs, sinking every ship of Marin that dared to enter the Atlantic. In the face of dozens of times the huge profits, the Portuguese must dare to do so. Therefore, instead of waiting to be chased and intercepted by the Portuguese at sea in the future, Marin might as well pass the blame to Spain now. Then, let the two sides fight each other. Moreover, in the face of the super profitable profits of dozens of times, Marin is not worried that Spain will not take the bait. Lao Ma once said that when businessmen are faced with 100% profit, they dare to trample on all human laws. When the profit reaches 300%, they dare to commit any crime, even at the risk of being hanged. And what percentage is 60 times the profit? That's 6,000%. Faced with such huge profits, businessmen are willing to work even if they will never be reborn after death. As for the king and the nobles, although they spoke beautifully and appeared noble on the surface, they would also reveal their greedy and shameless side when faced with interests. Therefore, if we tell the King of Spain about this 60-fold profit, the Spanish royal couple will definitely tear their faces apart and tear up the Treaty of Tordesillas, which is the papal meridian. Moreover, they were not worried about offending the Holy See, because the Pope was Spanish and even helped Spain bully Portugal. Originally, in history, Spain was deceived by Columbus and thought that India was to the west. Then, a few years later, they occupied Mexico, which was rich in gold and silver. Therefore, Spain had no intention of competing with Portugal for the huge profits of Indian trade. However, now that Marin secretly helped, he revealed that the American continent was just a wild continent and not the India that Columbus claimed. As a result, the Spanish kings suddenly lost most of their interest in America and only sent people to plant sugarcane on the islands discovered by Columbus. Then, they didn't have much intention to explore further. Because, after exploring, they didn't find the India that was full of gold that they expected. At this time, what's the problem if Marin just provides the information about the Indian route and lets Spain take the blame? The nautical charts of this era were extremely valuable, because without advanced instruments, all navigation data were recorded and compiled by experienced captains themselves. Each nautical chart was no less than the martial arts secrets in martial arts novels. For example, a nautical chart that could sail to India, the spice-producing area, would definitely be a super-secret book at the level of 9 Young Magical Skills in Jean Dada's martial arts novels. Marin's plan was to have Columbus show up in the Spanish port of Cadiz and put the blame on Spain, claiming that it was Spain that sent him to explore the route to India. Of course, before that, Marin needed to communicate with the Spanish court and negotiate the terms. Moreover, Columbus announced that Spain supported his exploration of India. Although it would turn against Portugal, it would be a great honor for the Spanish royal family. Because it represented that the royal family was foresight. Moreover, the huge profits that can be obtained later are even more crazy. Therefore, Marin does not believe that the Spaniards will not take the bait. The only thing that needs to be considered is that Marin cannot let all 4 ships dock in Spain. Because if the 4 ships of spices dock in Cadiz, the Spanish may have the intention of stealing the goods. Because the goods on these 4 ships are worth at least millions of gold coins. Therefore, Marin decided to send 2 ships to the Canary Islands to wait for Columbus's fleet. After meeting up with Columbus's fleet, Columbus only took one of the ships and took some spices as samples to meet the Spanish in Cadiz. In this way, the 4 ships' cargoes could be prevented from being stolen by the Spanish. And Columbus could also appear in public before da Gama, confirming his title of the first to discover India. This is what Marin had promised Columbus. However, if Columbus returned directly to the Wadden Islands, Marin's influence would be weak and he would not be able to prove Columbus's title of first to discover India. Because the Portuguese were more powerful and more convincing. If the Portuguese insisted that it was da Gama who discovered India first, Marin would not be able to argue with the Portuguese. If the Spanish were to take the blame, and Columbus was recognized by the Spanish royal family for his right to discover India, then Columbus's title of being the first to discover India could be easily established. Because da Gama was still on his way back, at least a month behind Columbus. Spain was a powerful country, and their recognition was much more effective than the words of the little Earl Marin. Moreover, in order to obtain the right to intervene in the Indian trade route, the 2 Spanish kings would spare no effort to help Columbus establish the title of the first to discover India. As for Marin's role in it, it's also very simple. After all, Marin still has the title of Count of the Spanish Wilderness on his head. Although this title seems useless at ordinary times, at this time, the Spaniards can completely say that it was the king and queen who ordered Count of the Spanish Wilderness, Marin, to send Columbus' fleet to explore the Indian route. In the end, the credit can still fall on the heads of the king and queen, giving them an excuse to interfere with the Indian route. Because, in this era, the colonists who first discovered a no man's land have priority. The same is true for trade routes. If the Spaniards discovered the Indian route first, even if it was not the Spanish sphere of influence, there was no reason not to share a piece of the pie. Chapter 258, Partial Relocation of the Salt Boiling Base. The reason why Marin placed the salt-making base on Texel Island was because he only had one territory, Texel Island, and could not place it anywhere else. In addition, because the coal came from Bochum, it had to be transported from the mouth of the Rhine. Therefore, Valentia became the place closest to the mouth of the Rhine in Marin's territory, and it was also the most convenient place for coal transportation. The incident of the coal-carrying ship being detained in the Principality of Guedes also reminded Marin that the secret of the salt-making base on Texel Island, which is so close to the Netherlands, is easy to be discovered. That is, the west coast of Texel Island is very shallow and not suitable for ships to sail, otherwise, there would have been ships docked to observe the salt-making base in Yencheng, Texel Island. As coal ships frequently docked at the port of Thorentchen, the Dutch on the other side began to wonder why Texel Island wanted to buy so much coal. The Dutch on the other side did not know about the salt, because every time Marin shipped salt out, it was packed well and never exposed. In addition, the island of Texel also prohibited outsiders from going to other places other than the port of Thorentsch, and violators would be arrested immediately. Therefore, the secret of the salt city was kept for a long time. But Marin knew that if the fishermen had a telescope, they could observe clearly even far away from the salt-making center of Yencheng. Therefore, Marin's control over the telescope became stricter. Marin even required that only serfs from Hoffman Manor, or serfs who had followed Marin for a long time, whose families were loyal and who had no foreign relations, were qualified to use the telescope. However, in order to further maintain confidentiality, Marin still built a tall wall on the west side of the Yencheng salt boiling center, close to the sea, to block the view from the sea. Even so, because there are coal ships coming from the Rhine and Newcastle, Marin feels that this place is not very safe. After all, too many coal ships will also arouse the curiosity of the outside world. If it is normal business activity, but Marin has moved the capital to East Frisia, the business activity here has increased instead of decreased, which seems a bit abnormal. After all, according to common sense, a place that has lost its status as a capital should be depressed. The most optimistic scenario is that it is about the same as before, and there is no reason to be more prosperous and lively than before. It just so happens that importing coal from Newcastle is actually no worse than unloading it at the port of Thorentsch. There are so many islands in the Wadden Islands that it doesn't matter where you unload it. Even the newly acquired East Frisian Islands have many places suitable for boiling salt. Moreover, it was really eye-catching to see a huge ship fully loaded with coal entering the narrow Mars Channel. After all, the ships that had previously unloaded at the port of Thorentsch were all small and medium-sized ships from the Rhine. Suddenly changing to a large sea ship would easily arouse speculation. Moreover, the Mars Channel is the main waterway for Amsterdam merchant ships to enter and exit the Wadden Sea. The Dutch fishermen in Den Helder across the way may be a little stupid and unable to guess the truth. If the smart and cunning merchants in Amsterdam knew about it, they might be able to deduce the truth. Therefore, Marin made adjustments and moved the location of the salt city a distance inland, no longer on the beach, which would easily attract the attention of passing ships. In addition, walls were erected around the salt boiling base, and only smoke could be seen from inside. Those who didn't know much would think there was a steel base inside. As for the problem of getting seawater, this is very simple. Just dig a diversion ditch and bring in seawater. Similarly, you can also dig a drainage ditch to drain the excess brine to the sea, but in a different direction. After thinking about it, Marin decided to partially relocate the salt boiling base. Specifically, the Yencheng Salt Boiling Center only retains the production capacity to supply Wright, the head of the Wiggins Chamber of Commerce in Cologne, and the Principality of Clever. Then, all the extra manpower was transferred to an island in the East Frisian Islands to re-establish a salt-making center. Marin had already thought of the name of this new salt-making center, which was called New Salt City. New Salt City will use imported British coal in the future, and the salt produced here will be shipped to the nearby Teutonic Knights. At the same time, the salt produced in New Salt City will also be supplied to the entire East Frisian state. At present, the salt of East Frisia actually depends on the mineral salt of Lüneburg, which makes Marin feel very surprised. You know, East Frisia is a coastal country, and it is a joke to import salt from an inland country. But the fact is that, like the Netherlands, the coastal areas of East Frisia lack firewood for salt boiling. Although there are some individual salt boiling households, they cannot form a large scale. Moreover, the original Sexner family seems to control the interests of salt sales. Therefore, the Sexner family prohibits coastal fishermen from boiling salt privately, and they can only buy Lüneburg mine salt, which is monopolized by the Sexner family. Marin has been in control of East Frisia for several months. As a salt tycoon, Marin naturally wants to take the monopoly of salt into his own hands. This is a highly profitable industry. The feudal dynasties of China have obtained a lot of taxes from the salt and iron monopoly, and also fattened a large number of corrupt officials. The entire territory of East Frisia, including the Wadden Islands, has a population of more than 80,000. With so many people added together, the consumption of salt is also considerable, and the profit is naturally not small. Moreover, the sea salt cooked in the salt cooking base of Malin has the habit of discarding bitter brine, so the bitterness in the salt is very weak and almost unnoticeable. Therefore, the salt produced in Yancheng is currently considered high-end salt in the European market. Only certain high-quality salt mines can produce it, and the price is very high. Marin's plan is to use high-quality sea salt to completely replace the bitter mineral salt of Lüneburg and make it a condiment for the people of East Frisia. Moreover, Marin also intends to use a low price instead of the price of high-end salt. Because even if he uses a low price, Marin can still make huge profits. In order to select the location of the new salt city, Marin personally went to the East Frisian Islands to choose a suitable place to boil salt. First, Borkum Island, which is located near the route from Emden Port to the North Sea, was ruled out. This is because it is located near a busy route and is likely to attract the attention of passing merchant ships. Merchants are very sensitive people, and if they find out, they will be copied. Secondly, we can't go too far east, because the easternmost island of Wongyog is close to the seashore of the rebellious Yefer region, and it would be bad if we were seen by the Yefer traders. Therefore, Marin could only choose a few islands in the middle. Marin hesitated for a long time between Norderney Island and Baltrum Island, but in the end, Marin chose the smaller Baltrum Island. Because Marin had conducted an on-site investigation and found that Norderney Island was large in area and rich in fresh water resources, so there were already many residents on the island. Moreover, there was frequent traffic between Norderney Island and the coastal town of Norden across the sea, which was not conducive to confidentiality. Baltrum Island, east of Norderney, is much smaller than Norderney Island, with an area of only about 6 square kilometers. Moreover, there are currently no residents on the island, which seems a bit desolate. But this is not a problem. What Marin wants is a remote place. He would not choose a prosperous and lively place. After a field investigation, Marin found that there were freshwater lakes and streams in the southern half of the island, which could fully supply fresh water for the salt boiling center. Moreover, this island is very peculiar. In the southeast of the island, there is a small peninsula that abruptly extends into the sea, like a natural long bridge pier. Marin poked it with a wooden pole and found that the water on both sides of this natural long bridge pier is quite deep, which is very suitable for docking ships. Finally, Marin made up his mind to build the new salt city on the southwest corner of Baltrum Island, next to the natural long bridge pier. Of course, like the salt city on Texel Island, the salt boiling center is no longer open air, but has tall walls built for easy defense. Because Baltrum Island is different from Texel Island. Most of the waters around Texel Island are not suitable for ships to dock, but although Baltrum Island is small, there are several places where ships can dock. For safety reasons, Marin decided to build the new salt city into a small urbanized island that specialized in salt boiling and had strong defenses. If the enemy wanted to attack, they would first have to face the strong city walls. However, in order to prevent the island from becoming independent in the future, Marin forbids the island from growing food, and only allows vegetables, even though the island has sufficient fresh water resources and can be used for farming. All food on the island is delivered by ships sent by Marin. In this way, the food is in Marin's hands, so there is no need to worry about them having the idea of independence. After all, the castle on the island can not only guard against enemies, but also prevent Marin from exercising power. Moreover, the small island of Baltrum has an area of only more than 6 square kilometers, so it would not be a big waste even if it is not used to grow crops. After selecting the address, Marin immediately ordered some salt boiling workers and their families in the old salt city to move to the new salt city. In addition, a group of masons were also brought to Baltrum Island to start building salt boiling pots and adobe houses. As for the walls and castles, there is no rush. The most important thing is to build the salt boiling pots and houses for people to live in and start boiling salt. After all, the Teutonic Knights are waiting for salt from here. Moreover, this place is relatively remote, far away from the shipping routes, and even away from the open sea towards the land. Outsiders generally don't come here. Domestic fishermen dare not approach here casually as long as they are ordered. Walls and the like are not needed for the time being. In addition, Marin also sent people to repair the natural Long Bridge Pier on the southwest corner of Baltrum Island to make it convenient for coal ships from the UK and merchant ships carrying salt from here to dock.